Hello, it is May 10th, 2024, and I was not planning on making this video. I was not planning on making any video today, but this is happening. I have to make this video, and this is a really important one. There's a solar flare heading to Earth. I don't know if you know that or not, but if you don't, it's because this became widely circulated on the internet the very early morning of May 10th, 2024, last night at the time of recording. We have four coronal mass ejections heading to Earth. This is a very large event. You are probably going to see it. You're probably going to experience it. And this has really important lessons and second order effects for the future. So, first of all, let's ask the question, is this a disastrous event? It seems like no. It seems like this is not a Caringtin level event. For those of you who don't know, the Caringtin event of the 19th century was a massive CME that would have wiped out the grid in today's terms. This was, like I said, in the 19th century. We barely had the telegraph, but telegraphs were arcing, right? So it was very primitive electric grid, very primitive technology. But if we had that kind of level event hit Earth with modern technology, our grid would not sustain it. We would lose the grid. It would be a complete disaster. Probably millions would die. It is not going to be that tonight. The Caringtin event was way farther south than what we're looking at today. The Caringtin event had the Aurora Borealis all the way down as far as Mexico, Cuba, way farther south than what we're looking. However, what we're still looking at tonight on May 10th and possibly May 11th is still going to be significant. Of course, we're looking at Canada and mainland United States as well as Alaska. Obviously, the chart, this little diagram here is self-explanatory. This is the Aurora Borealis forecast here. So pretty much all of Canada seems to be very probable for the Aurora, as well as the very northern tip of continental United States, as well as northern Michigan, where I happen to live. But however, there are new reports saying that it could be as far south as Alabama or other parts in the United States. So if you are in the United States or Canada, which a very large percentage of you watching this are, you very possibly could have one of the best nights viewing the Aurora tonight in about 20 years or so. This is apparently one of the most dramatic events of the last 20 years. It has the most dramatic warnings of this kind of the last 20 years. So, again, Friday night, May 10th, this is very possible to happen. And the reason I'm talking about this is, number one, the first actual thing that I think everyone should consider doing is, go out and see it. Go out and see the aurora, right? I mean, this only happens once every so often. This is probably the best night in 20 years. You have to go see the aurora. So, life is short, life is precious. If you have the chance, when it starts, just step outside, take a look up at the sky. You might see it, you might not. I don't have any clue. I'm not a scientist. I'm just going off based on what the reports are saying, but all the reports seem to be pretty clear that you might see the aurora tonight, which is pretty cool. The second thing I would like to say, though, that's really important is to understand that this is how risk happens. This is how fast it happens. Okay, we cannot prepare for these things. 24 hours ago, nobody was talking about this, and now the internet is a storm. Pardon the pun, but this is how risk happens. A solar flare or CME is one of those things that I've thought about for years. What if it were to be real, as in really, really bad, right? What if we were to have a Carrington level event, right? Again, you can read all about it. You can do your own research on the Caringtin event. But again, the Caringtin event was a very significant event, significantly larger than this one. Again, it happened in 1859, so a few years before the Civil War. And again, if this happened, this now in the modern era, if this happened in modern era, the grid would be down, right? So potentially for the entire planet, which would be completely devastating, but much more likely just for one hemisphere, right? So basically, you're taking a 50-50 shot of which side of the planet you're on when the solar flare hits, right? If the solar flare hits in, China on the eastern hemisphere, then all of Asia is wiped out, and the West survives, I suppose, or their grid survives, and vice versa. And so this is one of those things that I'm hoping to impart with this video, right? Is yes about solar flares, that you should be aware that this thing could happen, and it can happen really rapidly, literally overnight. But you should also be aware that this applies to all forms of risk, right? So obviously, I talk about Bitcoin a lot. Obviously, I talk about finance a lot. Obviously, I talk about the banking system a lot. But this thing is really, really true in finance, right? Why? Because money economics is a reflection of reality. It's a reflection of physics. And in the same way that you can have a forest that sits idle and flourishes for 30 years, and then overnight a forest fire could come. Or in the same way that you could be living your life day after day after day, and then all of a sudden you see the headlines of a massive solar flare coming your way that, if it was any larger, could potentially wipe out the grid. This is how risk happens. This is how it happens very quickly, right? And if we have a way of looking at a form of economics or looking at a form of currencies that reflects this reality of slowly then suddenly, this is Bitcoin in Egypt. This is the price of Bitcoin in Egypt back in 2016. It was 3,600. Then it was 21,000 in April of 2017. Then it skyrocketed to 350,000. It crashed over 80%, back down to 67,000, skyrocketed again, 150,000. This was in May of 2020. Speak of another slowly suddenly event, right? Many people in 2020 completely underestimated the extent of COVID, and they completely underestimated also the extent of fear around COVID, right? Risk happens fast, okay? Literally overnight, the world can change, okay? And this is the lasting point of this video, right? Whether it's a solar flare, whether it's a virus out of somewhere else in the world, whether that's a banking failure, whether that's Bitcoin rapid appreciation, all these things can happen really, really quickly, right? So back to Egypt, of course, we have 2021, 2022, then 2023, and then early 2023, when I started posting online about Bitcoin, Bitcoin is up over 560% in Egypt, right? Now, people would say, oh, it's only because, Egypt's currency has collapsed in value so much. Yes, that's the point. Bitcoin is the safe haven. Bitcoin is the store of value for the tens and tens of millions of people that live in Egypt. Your currency in Egypt is not an option for your purchasing power, right? Your stocks are skyrocketing in terms of your currency. Your house prices are skyrocketing in terms of your currency. And the same thing is true with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is rapidly appreciating in Egypt. And right here was an overnight devaluation of their currency by over 50%, okay? We cannot just wait around and be idle when you have the solar storm coming, right? We cannot just wait around and assume that nothing's ever going to happen, that everything's just going to continue as normal forever, and that things that have risk don't happen, right? This is why you take out insurance. This is why you take protections out against things, right? Because we don't know when the next solar flare is going to come. We don't know when the next overnight risk event is coming, okay? But that's what we're looking at here, right? That's what we're looking at with solar storm, and that's what we're looking at when Egypt debases their currency. Most people over here, back in August, in July and September of 2023, when Bitcoin was not even a third of its current price in Egypt, most people were not expecting that literally overnight that Egypt's currency would fall by over 50%, right? Okay, literally last night, most of you were not expecting to hear the news waking up this morning that there were 4 coronal mass ejections heading straight to Earth, right? Just because we don't expect things doesn't mean they're not going to happen. Let's take another example on a different continent, but one that's even dramatically worse. This is Argentina. This is Bitcoin price in Argentina. Back in 2015, it was 3,100 political currency units. Then it was 342,000. Okay, this is a 100x. Okay, right here, this flat line, this is a 10,812% gain of Bitcoin in terms of the Argentinian peso. Of course, then it continues to skyrocket, 300, 400, 500,000. Then, of course, in 2021, we get 5 million or so. Now we're up to 55 million or so. Okay, this is an increase of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 orders of magnitude here, okay? If you're living in Argentina, you are having a solar flare event continuously, right? You go along for weeks or months at a time where nothing changes, and then boom, overnight you have a 70% devaluation of your currency. You have another 20% devaluation of currency, back and back and back. This has been happening repeatedly for years, right? And the same thing is true with the solar flare. The same thing is true with what we're seeing from the sun right now. The sun is trying to warn you to take things seriously. Risk happens fast. It doesn't matter whether it's a disease or it's a solar flare or it's banking failure or it's some scam rug pulling you, right? Or some token that's made up out of thin air, right? And this is exactly what this was a couple years ago now, but I was warning people about FTX before it collapsed, right? This is FTX token, right? People often conflate FTX token with Bitcoin, but they are not the same. FTT token was a centralized digital token backed out of thin air by the promises of a curly-haired whiz kid fraudster out of the Bahamas, Sam Bankman-Fried or Fried, Sam Bankman-Wrecked, as some people like to joke about him. But the point is that this thing survived for a very long period of time, right? It skyrocketed in value by a factor of 10 or so in 2021. It survived throughout the entirety of 2021 after surviving in 2019 and 2020. Then it crashed a little bit in 2022. People thought it was fine. It was right about here in September and early October of 2022, where the CZ and Binance versus Sam Bankman-Fried FTX battle began, and it became very clear that these organizations were doing everything to support their own personal tokens. And then, of course, these final 72 hours here are when we had this warning, right? The final 72 hours of FTT token were this warning, where basically people woke up and realized, oh my goodness, we only have a few hours before this is going to hit, right? In the same way that you woke up today and you're hearing me make this video warning you about a solar flare in about 11 hours or so from time of recording, probably less than 11 hours while you're watching this, if you've been watching this before it hits. The same thing is true with FTT token, right? People, I remember this, okay? I remember this. I was talking to people a mere 12 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours before it collapsed. It was making all these rumors online, all this news. People were getting out. People are freaking out. I was telling people, like, do it now, or, and I remember I have the messages, okay, where people would say, Luke, I think you're right. I'm going to finally take it seriously. I'm going to bed right now. I'm so stressed, but tomorrow morning I'll figure it out. Well, guess what? They really regret that, okay? And the same thing is true with the solar flare. Risk happens fast, and by the time it is on your doorstep, it is too late. I don't care whether you are in a developing nation or we're talking about a political currency that's going to have a 50% overnight devaluation, right? Okay, let's look up Nigeria. This is an even worse example. Okay, go to the max. Okay, if you're in Nigeria, you don't have the American luxury to procrastinate understanding Bitcoin, because your currency might devalue in the course of a few hours, right? Bitcoin went up 200% in January of 2024 because Nigeria debased their currency so much, right? If you are in America, okay, you think you have the luxury because you don't need to worry about these things. But I'm telling you that as a function of time, this is only going to get more and more probable, right? Even Canada, to a much lesser degree, has had significant currency devaluation, right? Canada had an all-time high in nominal Bitcoin price a couple of weeks, I believe, before America did, okay, precisely because the Canadian dollar is inferior to the American dollar, right? And so it doesn't matter if it's a political currency controlled by a centralized entity that is a central bank. It does not matter if it's FTX garbage token issued by a fraudster. Either way, on a mathematical basis, it is fraud. On a mathematical basis, both of them result in the same range. Either they have to default in real terms or in nominal terms. In FTX case, it defaulted in both real terms and nominal terms because FTX does not have the military backing it and enforcing its currency devaluation onto everyone else. People could just voluntarily leave the exchange, but people in America don't. People in America are under that system where they are controlled, right? The same thing is true with Nigeria. The same thing is true with Egypt, right? The only difference between these countries and these exchanges is that these exchanges don't have the militaries to continue the currencies onwards, even when they have massive devaluations. Now, let's go to a different example. Okay, this is First Republic Bank stock. Okay, if you owned the S&P 500, you had exposure to this stock. This is what you had exposure to, right? Things were fine in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, even into February of 2023. Everyone thought everything is fine. Surely everything is fine. Yeah, the stock's not done great, but it's not done horrible. And then boom, all of a sudden you have your solar flare coming your way. You have an event you cannot prepare for. You have major insolvencies with Silicon Valley Bank. Risk spreads, risk happens fast, and then boom, overnight you have a 99.78% collapse in the value of the stock, right? And so if you own S&P 500, you had exposure to this, right? But most people are afraid of Bitcoin because they're afraid of Bitcoin crashing, failing to realize that the political currencies they are pricing Bitcoin from within are the things that are crashing. So what are the three takeaways from this video today? The three takeaways. The first thing is go out, live your life, just live your life, prepare for risk, and then you don't have to worry about these things every single day, right? There's no need waking up and every day being stressed out of your mind about a banking collapse, or stressed out of your mind about your self-custody not being properly set up, or stressed out of your mind of a solar flare wiping out half of the world. No, there's no point in being needlessly anxious about these things. It's why it's important to take responsible, reasonable risks every single point at which you can. It will improve your quality of life. It will help you live, right? So that's the first thing is go out tonight enjoy the solar flare, right? Or enjoy the Aurora Borealis, right? Enjoy the lights, right? If you're in Canada or in the United States, even potentially farther south than even what this line is showing, go out, view it, enjoy it. And then the second step is that prepare, understand that, we are in a peak period for solar storms, right? This only happens once every, I believe, 25 years or so. The next few years probably going to have a lot of solar storms, or at least a higher probability of solar storms. And today is literally an example of how quick it can happen. Okay, you can go to bed one night and think everything's fine, and then you wake up the next day, and all of a sudden there's a big problem coming, right? So I don't know what that means for you, but you should always have backups. You should always have a plan. You should always have some understanding. So at the very least, even if you're not fully prepared, you can take the edge of panic off. Because if a new event is coming and if a crisis is coming, even if you don't feel prepared in either scenario, taking action in a way that's not panicked or not fear inducive, where you're not emotionally prepared for that possibility versus the alternate, you're definitely going to do well in that latter scenario, right? So that's my second encouragement, is that understand that the world is very fragile. We saw that with COVID. We saw that with 2020, and we're seeing it literally today. Things are very fragile. Things can happen quickly. Risk happens fast. And the third thing, of course, I'm going to mention is that one of the easiest ways at which you can protect against a whole variety of risk happening fast scenarios is to protect your purchasing power against currency devaluations, right? A solar flare, we don't know what the probability is, but it's pretty high. There's a high probability of more solar flares hitting the Earth. And obviously later today, it's basically 99% that it's going to hit Earth, right? But there's a 100% guarantee that eventually at some point in the future, we are going to have continued currency devaluations, right? I don't know if that's going to be, a few percent. I don't know if that's going to be a large percentage, but it's probably going to happen. So if we price the US dollar in terms of Bitcoin, this is exactly what we see. We see periods of years where price chops sideways, where nothing happens. And then all of a sudden, overnight, we have these currency devaluations if you're looking from the terms of Bitcoin, okay? This is the US dollar priced in terms of Bitcoin. If we go out, since 2015 here, so barely 8 years, barely 9 years, we have a 99.48% collapse in the value of the dollar in terms of Bitcoin. So over the course of a couple of days, people ignore it. People think everything's fine. The course of a couple weeks or months, they might think, oh, wow, the dollar is okay because Bitcoin's fallen in dollar prices. But you got 6 months and you realize that the US dollar has fallen in value 40% in the last 6 months. In the last year, the value of the dollar has fallen about 56% in terms of Bitcoin, right? See, this is what people don't understand. They think that Bitcoin's going up because they have the unit bias looking from political currency, when in reality, it's the dollar that's falling in value, right? Your house price is not rising. Your stock prices are not rising. You're not getting richer and richer. You're getting poorer in real terms because we want to feel richer in unit terms, in nominal terms. You see, this is what most people don't understand. And so my point is, one of the easiest ways you can protect against one of the most likely slowly then suddenly events in your entire life is by adopting Bitcoin, right? You can probably do very little to prepare for a solar storm if we really have it. You can probably do very little to prepare against World War III if we're going to have it. But you can buy Bitcoin. You can take self-custody. That protects you against currency devaluations. That protects you against all kinds of investment risks, right? In the same way that, yes, a fire still might happen, but at least you can have the fire insurance. Yes, these bad things in the world still may happen, but at least you can own Bitcoin in that process. Okay, Ukraine refugees that left Ukraine when Russia invaded a couple years ago. Okay, many of those people had Bitcoin. Okay, there are people that when the Taliban took over, when the United States pulled out of Afghanistan, many of those people had Bitcoin. There are many people in Latin America that have Bitcoin. There are people in Egypt that have Bitcoin. People in Argentina that have Bitcoin. Okay, they can't change the destruction and chaos around them, and that's a very unfortunate and sad thing. Bitcoin doesn't fix those things, but Bitcoin does help protect them against these events, right? So that's my encouragement for today, is understand that risk happens fast. Understand, go out and live your life. Enjoy this precious time we have on Earth, right? Go out, see the Aurora Borealis, understand that these things could happen in the future. Do everything you can to prepare against the things outside your control, and then take responsibility for the things inside your control. The solar storm is outside your control, but you can choose which currency to save your wealth in. Are you going to save your currency in the dollar? Are you going to save your currency in the S&P 500? Or are you going to save it in Bitcoin? S&P 500 is fine because you're saving in corporate energy of America, but corporate energy of America sometimes rug pulls you because they're run by centralized human organizations, right? But Bitcoin does not do that. So if you need help with buying Bitcoin or learning about Bitcoin, of course, you can contact me at the Bitcoin advisor, right? We focus on what matters. We're driven by goals, right? We care not just about number go up, but we care about wealth go up, peace of mind go up, and lifestyle go up, right? More than money. We have a focus on simplicity, the value in partnership and ongoing service, and people are ready for the truth, right? The truth is that we could have slowly then steadily events. The truth is that the dollar is dying, that the dollar is going away. And even though that's inconvenient and nobody wants to admit that, that's what we talk about. So of course, you can get the 38-page collateral custody checklist, as well as the 5-hour course. Of course, all you have to do is submit that in the link in the description down below. And then let's see. Yeah, I suppose that's my point today, right? Is that if you're not on Bitcoin, please consider buying some Bitcoin, because it doesn't protect you against every major risk in life, but it does protect you against some of the most predictable risks in life, right? Even the United States government itself has projected that we're going to have debt to GDP exceed 530%, which for context, 130% is enough to warrant a very continual historical precedent of hyperinflation, default, and war. The continued devaluation of the dollar is not only likely, it is inevitable. Granted, not as fast as other countries, right? Nigeria, Argentina, Sri Lanka, Lebanon, Cuba, Ecuador, Egypt, South Africa, India, China, all these countries are going to have significantly faster devaluations than the United States. But it doesn't change the reality that the currency is just going to continue to fall away. And I hope it doesn't happen. But someday we're going to have a solar flare level event for the dollar, and it's going to fall 8% in a single week, or it's going to fall 10% in a single week, or we're going to have another March 2020-esque moment where we have a major virus, or we're going to have another moment like today with the solar flare. So anyway, yeah, go enjoy the Aurora tonight. Tell your family, tell your loved ones, be safe, be smart, and buy Bitcoin, take self-custody. All links in the description below, because when this happens, when this hits the fan, I'm not going to be able to help everyone, right? By the time the news that the solar flare is on its way, it's too late. By the time that too late to upgrade the grid, right? By the time that you realize that your exchange is insolvent, it's already too late to get out. By the time you realize that your political currency is going to be devalued by 30% tomorrow by the governing authorities, it's already too late. By the time you realize these things, it's too late. So do everything you can to prepare ahead of time, right? I'm not saying this being a fear monger. I'm saying this and using a healthy dose of fear to install, hopefully, wisdom and positive action, right? As the Bible says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right? Fear is healthy, and that it begins wisdom, and that begins a desire to take action. So please use this slight touch of fear you have in regards to currency devaluation, in regards to solar flares, in regards to these other things. Use that little bit of fear to understand you need to get off zero. You can't wait any longer. You have to have a plan. Avoid panic, because when this happens, and if you're panicked, you're going to make bad decisions. Click the link in the descriptions below. Thank you. Enjoy the Aurora.